We very recently, the National Assembly came up with plans to amend the NLNG Act. Give us your view on this. Do you think it is time for a review or an amendment of the Act?
Of course, the National Assembly, as the legislative arm of government, always has the right to look at any bill, any act, and to deliberate on it, and to go through processes to see whether it is indeed time. From our perspective, we think it is not appropriate to be doing a review on the NLNG Act, and I'll give the reasons why. For the start, it took more than 30 years before the NLNG plant was built. Many companies came and left the country because the country was just not viewed internationally as a place to bring in the amount of investments we're talking about. So it took the NLNG Act, which is really a contract act between the government of Nigeria and the investors, to attract $6 billion that they brought in to build this investment. And what that NLNG Act does is a couple of things. One, it gives some incentives, some tax holidays, 10 years for the company income tax. It gives custom duty free during the construction period, and it also then protects the company against any other new taxes and levies that will be done. And you must understand this from an investor's perspective. If you're bringing $6 billion, you don't want to have your economics developed on a basis and then halfway through the process, all sorts of manners of taxes and levies starts to affect that whole economics. So this was put in place by the government of Nigeria to attract $6 billion. It does have in that act what is called assurances and guarantees, where Nigeria said, we will honor this agreement, we will assure you that we will not change this. I mean, in many parts of the world, the handshake is enough for people to get into a deal, and they honor it. So the first thing to say is that to amend this act now means we are not honoring our word. It means that we deceive people to bring in their investments, and then halfway through we're changing the laws that they used to bring their investment. The second thing to remember is that in 2002, both the Attorney General of the Federation, the Minister for Finance, and the CBN Governor wrote letters of undertaking to international investors to assure them again that Nigeria will honor this act. It will, throughout the duration of the project, abide by it. And the international community, because of this again, brought additional funds. Even as recent as 2 years ago, we went out again to get over $1 billion to build new ships for the venture. So you've seen huge investment coming into NLNG. In fact, because of that stability, we can borrow money in NLNG even cheaper than the government can borrow. But when you start to make this kind of changes, then you lose trust. Nigeria as a country will start to be seen as not a place to go. Because even if they promise you something, even if they put it in law, they will not honor it. So I think that is very important to think about. But I think the second thing to then think about is, if you do this, we were talking earlier about the Train 7, $10 billion in investment, $15 billion upstream. You can forget that, because people will say, we can't trust this country. Even if they give you a law and a bill, they will not honor it. And the last thing to say I will mention is that if you do that, because that's your reneging on an agreement, what the investors can do is to take you to international courts. We saw this same kind of thing happen to us in Bakassi as a country. And when we went to the international court ruled against us. Today, Bakassi is in Cameroon. You can have that same situation here, and the courts internationally will fine Nigeria. We've seen it. Venezuela has been fined. Ecuador has been fined. Over $1.8 billion. I don't think this is the reputation we want for our country. I think our country needs an environment that can support what Mr. President is doing, which is trying to bring in investments into the country. So as far as I can see, this is not the time to be looking at making a change to a law that enabled you earn $6 billion in investment and has returned to the government $33 billion. What are you changing it for?
But Mr. Omotawa, you must realize that something must have come up to make the National Assembly decide that it is time for us to review this particular act. So why is it that it's been opposed? Have you asked, what does the legislature want to achieve in terms of amending this particular act?
Yes, on this particular occasion, and don't remember, this is not the first time this has happened. 2008, we had the same experience. The National Assembly looked at it, and at that time, once they looked at it, they said, no, don't touch this. They took that decision in the National Assembly in 2008. On this occasion, it's about asking NLNG to pay the NDDC levy, a 3% levy to the NDDC. Now, specifically on that, this issue has gone to the courts in Nigeria. It went to the Federal High Court, it went to the Appeal Court, it went to the Supreme Court. The Federal High Court, the Appeal Court ruled that this levy does not apply to NLNG. The Supreme Court dismissed the case on its own merit. Now, what was not achieved in court is now being attempted to be used through legislative engineering. I think our legislators are honorable people. I think they will look at the issues, and I think they will see that it is not right to do that. Remember also that for the NDDC, the main aim of the NDDC was to help to develop the Niger Delta, especially from ecological and environmental damages, oil spills, gas flaring, and all of that. So oil companies who are contributing to that environmental issues had to pay this fee. NLNG is not like that. In NLNG, we are actually helping to solve gas flaring. We've brought gas flaring down from 65% to 25%. So we do not create any environmental damage in the Delta. We are actually the solution to the Niger Delta.
What other contributions do you make, apart from the fact that we've seen gas flaring reduced by more than 40%?
Excellent question. I don't think there's any other company that's done as much as we've done in the Niger Delta. We've spent more than close to $200 million developing areas in the Niger Delta. In fact, as recent as a few weeks ago, we even offered to the government to partner and provide 60 billion naira to build a road from Bodo through Andoni, through Ogoni, into Bonny. This is in the Niger Delta. We sponsor more than 3,000 children in the Niger Delta in terms of scholarships. We've built vocational colleges in the Niger Delta. We've built engineering facilities in the universities in the Niger Delta. We've built schools, we've built hospitals, and we build them. So the difference with Nigeria is we will do what we say. And so we are not in any way against development of the Niger Delta. In fact, I think we're a champion of development of the Niger Delta. We have projects we can point to, and we can show you what we've done. Even recently, we've had an agreement with the Bonny community, the MOU we recently signed. Every year we'll provide 3 billion naira to that community to help to develop Bonny to a vision that we think can be a Dubai, a Singapore in the future, when you look at 25 years of that. So we have no objection. We are in full support of working to develop the Niger Delta. We've offered that, look, rather than jeopardize Nigeria's interests by amending this bill, why don't we and NDDC sit down? We have the same objective, develop the Niger Delta, then we can agree on projects, then we can work those projects. But that doesn't seem to be of interest. It seems to be more of interest to force a levy on the company that the courts have said no, and that the National Assembly itself has assured the world that we will not touch.
So, we know what the National Assembly wants. We know what the NLNG wants. What do you think the executive wants? That's the presidency. I
think it's no doubt. The president has been very clear. He wants to reflate this economy by attracting investors. You cannot attract investors by becoming a country that doesn't honor its obligations. Nobody will touch you if you are seen to be a 419 country. There may be people who do 419 in Nigeria, but as a country, we are not a 419 people. And I'm very clear that Nigeria, the executives are very clear. We've had engagements, of course, with the Attorney General. Remember, Attorney General, CBN Governor, Minister for Finance signed in 2002 that we will honor this agreement. And in the public hearing that was held, the Attorney General's representative was there, and the Attorney General was clear. We should honor agreements that we have signed as a country. So I'm very clear that the executives are fully supportive that this act doesn't need to be touched.
Well, we know that the Petroleum Industry Bill is a bill that has been very hotly commented on from both parties, people who understand it and people who don't understand it. But everybody just believes that it's in the best interest of Nigeria to have the Petroleum Industry Bill passed. Is it in the best interest for the gas industry as well?
Of course. And the main reason is that it's the upstream companies that play a big role in what happens in gas. They explore, they produce, they transport gas. And the PIB has a big impact on the upstream companies, both in terms of, one, providing a clear legislative framework, two, in terms of funding, which has been a big issue. And so the PIB will indeed create a much better environment for the upstream companies to be able to operate. For example, if you think about the funding problems, which has been an issue, is simply because the JV system we have today expects the government every year to bring in the revenues that will be used by the oil and gas companies. If you just think of the gas industry alone, we need at least about $10 billion to be able to explore, produce gas that is required for the demand that we see. So even in that sector alone, and the government's own 55–60%, that means the government should bring out $6 billion every year. It just won't happen. Government needs to focus on infrastructure, create more welfare for the people, and look after their well-being, not spending money to invest. And the private sector can invest. NLNG is a good example. Since the very first investment that the government put in the 90s, government has not put a kobo into NLNG ever since then. and we've been generating revenue every year, we've been borrowing money every year, and we're returning the dividends to the government. As I said, we paid $4 billion to the government last year. The government didn't put a couple into us last year, or hasn't put in the last 16 years. So those are the kind of models that I think the PIB will help the upstream companies so that we can grow. If you look at now, production has gone down in the upstream to about 1.6 million barrels a day. During the era of President Obasanjo, we were looking at creating a 4 million barrel a day production as a target. How have we fallen from 4 million barrels to 1.6 million barrels? So the PIB will play a big role, and I'm glad that the legislators are very keen about it. They've taken a very, I think, wise approach. They are passing them in bits. So they've taken the first one, which they are going through to talk about NNPC. I think that is great. And then they will go through all the other stages and hopefully create that clarity, certainty, and to be able to see how we can get this industry really growing. We've really lost pace in the industry over the last, I think, 7-8 years. And it will take us time to catch up. But once they pass this bill, I think it will really help move the industry forward.
What's your outlook for the rest of the year? Are you bullish or British or bearish on the gas market?
That's a tough question because there's so many indices in Nigeria. But I think I have so much confidence in the fact that the current government is much more better focused. They're looking at addressing issues, they're having the engagement, they're taking out corruption from the industry. And I think all that is sending very positive signals into the market globally. I think our legislators are working on several issues, the PIB, and I think how they handle the NLNG Act review will also send a signal. I think we still have issues, as I mentioned, in terms of investments in the industry, which will take time to be resolved. So I think the environment is moving in the right direction, but it takes time to resolve the issues of funding, of security, and all of that.
And infrastructure.
And infrastructure that we still have to build. But if you ask me, I'm much more positive, I'm much more optimistic. I think this country has great potential. Gas is our future, and I think everything that needs to be done, we as a country need to do that so that we can really grow this industry.
So it's a bullish call for the gas industry. Thank you so much, Mr. Omotowa, for coming on the program this morning and shedding light on some of those issues for us.
Thank you very much.
Babs Omotowa is the Managing Director, Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas.